Just because I can't stand up anymore, you think you get to walk away?
Maya whispered it to no one, eyes fixed on the last line of the text message glowing on her phone. Her wedding dress was soaked at the hem from the damp grass by the Mississippi River. The lilac-trimmed veil lay crumpled beside her, streaked with mud. There was no groom. There was no wedding. Just the river, the hum of distant traffic, and the kind of silence that makes your chest ache. A few yards away, a man with warm brown skin and tired eyes was spreading out a picnic blanket for his 8-year-old twin daughters. His name was David Carter, and tonight was supposed to be about remembering his wife. Instead, before the sun went down over New Orleans, all 4 of their lives would quietly, stubbornly change. To understand how a broken bride and a grieving father ended up sharing the same patch of riverbank, we have to go back to that morning, when Maya still believed this would be the happiest day of her life. That day started with light. It slipped through the thin curtains of Maya's tiny apartment in Tremé, painting soft squares of gold across the wooden floor. The neighborhood was already awake, distant jazz spilling from a radio, someone arguing playfully on a balcony, the smell of chicory coffee drifting up from the cafe at the corner. Maya sat in front of a cracked mirror, bare shoulders tense, hair coiled into soft, natural curls. The wheelchair beneath her creaked every time she shifted. On the bed behind her, carefully laid out on a clean sheet, was a wedding dress that did not care she could not walk in it. And beside it, folded with almost sacred care, was a veil edged with lilac lace. She reached for it with both hands, fingers brushing the delicate trim. "Grandma," she murmured, voice trembling, "you really believed this would happen, didn't you?" She could almost hear Grandma Ruth's laugh, rough and warm, the way it had been before the cancer took her. "You'll find someone who doesn't just hold your hand, baby. You'll find someone who stays. When you do, you wear this. You hear me? Lilac is for the ones who don't give up." At 28, Maya had learned to give up on many things. On dancing down Bourbon Street, on running for the streetcar, on standing in the library aisles without something to lean on. 9 months ago, a driver who blew a red light had taken all of that in a rush of screeching tires and shattered glass. The doctors had called it spinal trauma. Maya called it the night her future shrank. Her job as a community librarian went from full-time to maybe later. Friends stopped visiting as often. People started talking to her like she was made of glass. Or pity. And then there was Jason. Jason, with his smooth promises and pressed shirts. Jason, who had stood by her hospital bed and said, "I'm not going anywhere, Maya. Wheelchair or not, we're still us." She had held on to that sentence like a lifeline. Now she smoothed the fabric of her dress over her legs, carefully maneuvered herself into it, and let her cousin fasten the back. "You look beautiful," her cousin breathed. Maya smiled, small and shy, eyes bright with tears. "Do I look like a bride?" "You look like the bride," her cousin said firmly. "Jason's going to lose his mind when he sees you." Maya's phone buzzed once on the nightstand. She glanced at it, expecting some nervous, excited message from her fiancé. Nothing. Just a notification from the group chat. She told herself he was busy, tying his tie, finding his cufflinks, being a good groom. Her hands found the lilac veil again. She lifted it, felt the weight of history in it, of her grandmother's calloused fingers, of every lonely night it had sat in the drawer waiting. "Okay," she whispered to herself, to the mirror, to the woman she still hoped she could be. "Let's go get married." Across town, a bus hissed to a stop. David Carter stepped down first, holding out his hand for his daughters. Zoe jumped into it, her braids swinging. Mila followed, clutching a small plastic container full of stale bread. "Stay close," David said automatically, eyes scanning the street. "Watch the curb." "We know, Daddy," Zoe huffed, rolling her eyes. "You say that every time." And I'll keep saying it, he answered, lips twitching. Until you're 80. They walked the few blocks to the riverfront, air thick with humidity and history. Today, the Mississippi was sluggish and brown, reflecting a sky already fading toward late afternoon. David carried a worn backpack full of food, a folded blanket under one arm, the quiet weight of memory on his shoulders. 2 years. 2 years since the accident. 2 years since Alicia's laugh had been swallowed by sirens and smoke. He had chosen this day and this place on purpose. The riverfront had been their spot, his and Alicia's, and before the girls were born, they'd sat here with takeout containers on their laps, talking about everything and nothing. After the twins came, the spot became a place to escape the chaos, even if only for 20 minutes. Now it was where the twins came once a year, on this date, to hang out with Mommy. David spread the blanket where they always did, near a rusty lamppost and a crooked bench. The girls plopped down, chattering, arguing about who would feed the ducks first. He tried to focus on them, on the way Zoe exaggerated her stories, on how Mila quietly broke her bread pieces smaller so the ducks wouldn't choke. But his eyes kept drifting to the empty space beside him. I miss you, he thought, staring at the river. I'm trying. I'm really trying. He didn't know that a woman in a white dress was making her own way toward the Mississippi at that very moment, a lilac veil crumpled in her bag and a text message burning in her pocket. The ceremony was supposed to start at 3. By 3:15, the guests were checking their phones. By 3:20, someone had asked, "Is there traffic?" in a tone that carried more curiosity than concern. Maya sat near the front of the small church, surrounded by flowers and whispers. The aisle looked impossibly long. The air smelled like roses and old wood polish. Her hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair so tightly that her knuckles had gone pale. The lilac veil lay across her lap, soft and patient. He's probably just running late, her cousin murmured, kneeling beside her. You know how Jason is with time. Maya laughed weakly. Yeah, Mr. 10 more minutes. The officiant cleared his throat. The murmurs grew louder. Maya's mother figure in the church community, Mrs. Henderson, squeezed her shoulder from behind. Give him a few more minutes, baby, she said. Maybe he had car trouble. Maya's phone buzzed in her lap. Her heart leapt. Jason. She swallowed, opened the message. It wasn't long. I can't do this. I thought I could handle everything, but I can't. I need someone who can walk beside me, not someone I'll have to take care of forever. I'm sorry, Maya. I just can't. For a moment, the words didn't make sense. They floated on the screen, harmless shapes. Then meaning hit her all at once, like a cold wave. The church faded. The flowers blurred. The sound of guests whispering became a low, ugly roar in her ears. Behind her, someone gasped. Another person muttered, On her wedding day? A different voice, not even trying to be quiet, whispered, I always wondered if he'd really go through with it. Heat shot up her neck. Shame, bright and suffocating. Maya heard herself laugh, a small, shattered sound. Is everything all right? The officiant asked from the front, already knowing the answer. She could stay. She could let them gather around her in a circle of pity, pat her shoulders, tell her she was strong. She would heal. She would move on. She could become a story they'd tell for years. Remember that poor girl in the wheelchair who got left at the altar? Her fingers tightened around her phone. Excuse me, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Then louder. Excuse me. She turned the wheelchair toward the side aisle and began to roll. Maya, her cousin breathed. Wait. Maya, honey, let's talk. Mrs. Henderson started. She kept moving. Past their outstretched hands, past their wet eyes, past the floral arrangements that suddenly smelled cloying and wrong. Outside, the air hit her like a slap, the heavy, humid New Orleans heat. She gulped it in as if she'd been underwater. On the church steps, she stopped, lifted her phone again. Her thumb hovered over Jason's message. She scrolled up through 100 older ones. I love you. We'll get through this. You're my girl. Your chair doesn't change anything, and felt each lie like a bruise. Tears blurred the screen. Just because I can't stand up anymore, she whispered, a bitter laugh catching in her throat. You think you get to walk away? Her voice cracked on the last word. A rideshare notification popped up, asking if she wanted to go home. Home. 4 walls and furniture she'd picked with him. The place he'd kissed her. The place he wasn't coming back to. Her thumb moved almost of its own accord. She changed the address. Mississippi Riverfront. The driver arrived in 8 minutes. Maya didn't remember getting into the car. She barely remembered the ride, only the smear of streets and the way the veil slid off her lap and onto the floor, collecting dust. By the time the car door closed behind her at the river, the text message had seared itself into her memory. I need someone who can walk beside me. She wheeled herself across the walkway, the sound of the river growing louder with each turn of her wheels. When she reached a small patch of grass near a crooked bench and rusty lamppost, her strength gave out. Her hands slipped, and the wheelchair jerked to a halt. She let it. She let everything go. The veil slid from her lap and fell into the dirt, lilac trim soaking up mud. Maya folded in on herself and finally properly cried. David heard it as he was unpacking the food. It wasn't a regular crying sound, not the whiny, I didn't get what I wanted wail of a child. This was deeper. Raw. The kind of sound someone makes when something inside them has snapped and they're still trying to pretend it hasn't. He froze, half a sandwich in his hand. Daddy? Mila looked up from the container of bread. You okay? He glanced toward the sound. All he could see from this angle was the edge of a white dress and a wheelchair, angled slightly away. A veil lay on the ground, smeared dark. Someone's upset, Zoe announced, following his gaze. Stay here, David said, voice low. On the blanket. You hear me? Are you going to help her? Mila asked. He hesitated. Today wasn't supposed to be about strangers. Today was about Alicia. About memory and grief and keeping some broken promise he'd made to himself to never forget. But that sound. It echoed something he remembered too well. The way he had cried in the hospital bathroom the night the doctor said the words didn't make it. Yeah, he said, throat thickening. I'm going to see if she needs help. He wiped his hands on his jeans, straightened, and walked slowly toward the woman in the white dress. From where she sat, Maya heard footsteps in the grass and cursed under her breath. The last thing she wanted was an audience. Hey, a voice said gently, a man's voice. Ma'am? Do you need me to call someone? She dragged the back of her hand across her eyes and turned her head. The man was black, probably mid-30s, with close-cropped hair and a beard that needed trimming. His eyes were what struck her most, tired, kind, like he'd seen his share of storms. Behind him, 2 little girls waited on a blanket, watched her openly. Maya inhaled, embarrassed by the streaky makeup she could feel on her face. I'm fine, she snapped, out of reflex. I just dropped something. Her eyes flicked to the veil in the mud. Her chest clenched. The man followed her gaze. I can pick that up for you if you want. Don't. The word came out sharper than she intended. Just leave it, please. He nodded slowly, hands raising in a calm surrender. All right, I can do that. All right. They stood in awkward silence. The river gurgled. A duck quacked indignantly at a seagull. Maya sniffed, angry at herself, at him, at the whole spinning world. I'm sorry, she muttered after a moment. You don't have to stand there. I'm not your problem. The man took a step back, not away but to give her space. You're right, he said quietly. You're not my problem. She braced herself for the rest. You're not my business. You're not my concern. Have a nice day. But, he shifted his weight, eyes flicking briefly toward his daughters. I know what it sounds like when someone's breaking. Feels wrong to pretend I don't hear it. Maya swallowed hard. We don't even know each other, she said. He offered a small, wry smile. Name's David. She didn't want a name. Names meant people, and people meant the possibility of more hurt. She wanted to sink into the river and wash away, but her mouth betrayed her. Maya. Nice to meet you, Maya, David said. I'm not going to ask what happened, unless you want to tell someone who has no right to judge you. She looked at him then, really looked at him. The lines around his eyes, the way his hands flexed, restless, like he was used to fixing things that couldn't be fixed. The way he kept glancing back at the blanket where two little girls waited, trusting he'd come back. There was grief there. Old, heavy, familiar. Maya exhaled. It came out as a shaky laugh. You ever been left standing somewhere you were supposed to be loved? She asked. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yeah, he said softly. I have. She stared at her crushed veil, at the mud on her dress, at the mocking glow of her phone. Today was my wedding day, she said. Oof, he winced. And he texted, she finished, voice flat. Didn't even bother to show up. David didn't say I'm sorry. The words felt flimsy, and he seemed to know it. He just nodded, slowly. That's a special kind of cowardice. A short, bitter burst of laughter escaped her. Yeah, guess I have a type. Behind them, the twins grew restless. Zoe stood up on the blanket. Dad, she called, are we feeding the ducks or what? 2 minutes, David called back. The girls huffed, but sat down again, whispering to each other. Maya watched them, eyes softening despite herself. They're yours? Yeah, he said, following her gaze. Zoe and Mila, 8 years old. Think they run the city. They might, Maya murmured. Kids are terrifying like that. He smiled again, a little easier this time. Silence settled between them, less jagged than before. So, David said eventually, nodding toward the veil. Is that important? Maya's throat constricted. It was my grandmother's, she said. She told me to only wear it with someone who'd never leave. David took that in. And did you wear it today? Yeah, she whispered. Guess I miscalculated. A gust of wind tugged at the veil, flipping one lilac-edged corner over itself. David shifted, hands in his pockets. Look, he said slowly. I brought my girls here to remember their mom. It's kind of a rough day for us, too. He paused, choosing his words. But if you don't want to be alone right now, we've got more food than we can eat, and those ducks are real greedy. You're welcome to share the blanket. No obligation. You can say no. I'll walk away, and we can pretend we never met. Maya opened her mouth to refuse, to say, I don't need your charity. I don't need your kindness. I don't need anything from anyone ever again. Instead, what came out was a soft, exhausted, why? David's brow furrowed. Why what? Why would you invite a stranger? She gestured at herself. A stranger in a dirty wedding dress, in a wheelchair, ugly crying by the river, to sit with your kids on a day like this. He held her gaze. No flinching. No pity. Just something steady and sad. Because, he said, voice low, if on the night my wife died, someone had found me in the hospital parking lot and asked if I wanted to sit with people instead of being alone, I think it might have saved me a lot of bad decisions. Her breath caught. He went on. And because my girls are going to grow up black and female in this world, I want them to see that when someone is hurting nearby, and we can make it even 1% easier, we try. Even if it's awkward, even if it's messy, even if they're a stranger in a wedding dress. For a long moment, all Maya could do was stare at him. Then, very quietly, she said, "I don't have anywhere to be." Then, David said gently, "You could be here, just for a little while." "Hi," Zoe announced 2 minutes later, when Maya's wheelchair rolled up to the edge of the blanket. "Why are you wearing a princess dress?" "Zoe," David warned, but Maya shook her head. "It's okay," she said, wiping a stray tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. "I kind of asked myself the same thing." Mila tilted her head, serious. "Did someone hurt your feelings?" Maya considered lying, smiling, saying something vague. "Yes," she said instead. "They did." "Jerk," Zoe muttered with the righteous fury of a child. "Do you want to feed the ducks with us? They don't know how to text, so they can't be mean." A laugh bubbled out of Maya before she could stop it. "You make a good point." David handed her some bread. His fingers brushed hers, warm and solid. For the first time all day, her chest didn't feel like it was collapsing in on itself. They sat like that for a while, 3 kids at heart and 2 actual kids tossing bread into the water, watching ducks squabble and steal from each other. The sky deepened from gold to amber. The jazz from a nearby street musician floated over them, lazy saxophone notes threading through the evening. Between duck feeding and sandwich eating, stories slipped out. The girls told Maya about their mom, Alicia, who used to sing loud in the kitchen and dance with dishcloths. David told her in fragments about the day of the crash, about the way grief had hollowed him out. Maya told them about the community library where she used to work, where kids from the neighborhood would pile onto beanbags and fall asleep with books on their chests. "Hey," Zoe said suddenly, squinting at her. "I know you." Maya blinked. "You do?" "Yeah," Zoe nodded vigorously. "You're the library lady, the one who showed us that book about the girl with the pet chicken." Mila's eyes widened. "The chicken that thought it was a dog?" Maya's lips parted. "You two. You were the twins who never returned their books on time." David groaned. "Busted." "I was gonna," Zoe protested. "We just needed a few more days." Maya remembered then, a harried father, an apologetic smile, 2 energetic girls, and a stack of overdue picture books. "I guess we've met before," she said softly. "See?" Mila beamed. "We're not strangers." Maybe, Maya thought, this wasn't the first time their paths had crossed. Maybe life had been nudging them closer for a while, waiting for a crack big enough for light to get through. The light that finally came that day wasn't gentle, but it was real. Eventually, the food ran out. The ducks wandered off, bored and full. The girls lay back on the blanket, staring at the sky. "Daddy?" Mila whispered. "Yeah, baby?" "Do you think Mommy can see us?" David swallowed hard. "I hope so." "Do you think she sees Miss Maya too?" Zoe asked. "She probably likes her. She's nice, and she knows lots of stories." Maya's throat tightened. "I'm sure your mom would like that you're sharing your blanket," she said quietly. The twins smiled, satisfied. The sun dipped lower. The lamppost near them flickered to life, casting a warm pool of light. Maya looked at her phone. She didn't open any messages. Somewhere in another part of the city, people were still whispering about her, she was sure. The bride who got left. The tragedy in white. Here, though, she was just a woman in a muddy dress, sitting by the river with a widower and his daughters. When the girls started to yawn, David began packing up. He folded the blanket slowly, as if trying to fold time back with it. Maya shifted in her wheelchair, suddenly nervous. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me crash your family day." Pretty sure we crashed yours, David replied. She managed half a smile. I don't know where I'm going to go tonight, she admitted. My lease ends today. I thought I'd be moving in with... She trailed off. The rest didn't need saying. David paused. It would have been easy to tell himself he'd done enough. He'd invited her to sit, shared food, offered company in the worst hour of her day. He could walk away now, head home, tuck his girls into bed, and feel good about himself. But the image of her sitting alone by the river, dress soaked, veil in the mud, burned behind his eyes. Maya, he said slowly, carefully, I know this might sound insane, and you're absolutely allowed to say no. She looked up, wary. I've got a small house, he continued. There's a spare room. It used to be my workroom, but it's mostly just storage now. If you don't have anywhere safe to go tonight, you're welcome to stay there. Just for a few days, until you figure out your next move. Her eyes widened. I can't. David, you don't even know me. I know you got left on your wedding day, and you don't deserve to spend tonight alone in a motel or in a place that feels like a ghost, he said quietly. I know you helped my daughters learn to love books without even realizing it. I know my girls already trust you more than half the adults in their lives. That's not... He held up a hand. You don't owe me anything, and I'm not asking for anything. You'd have your own room. If you ever feel uncomfortable, you leave. I remember what it's like to be too sad to think straight. Sometimes you need someone else to hold the door open for a minute. Maya stared at him, at the twins now stuffing wrappers into the trash, at the river glittering under the streetlights. Everything in her life had broken today, every plan, every promise, and somehow in the rubble, this man was offering a couch and 4 walls and a room that didn't ask her to be okay yet. I don't want to be your charity case, she whispered. David's gaze softened. You're not. You'd be a guest, a friend, if you want that. The word friend felt strange in her chest. She thought of Grandma Ruth, of the veil, of that stupid text message. Maybe this was foolish. Maybe it was risky. Maybe in the morning she'd decide it was a terrible idea. But right now she was so tired. Just a few days, she said, more to herself than to him. He nodded. Just a few days. Zoe cheered. Yes, sleepover. Mila grinned. We can read books before bed. Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Okay, she said. I'll come. And just like that, a new chapter began. Quietly, on a riverbank, with ducks complaining in the background. Days slipped into weeks. The spare room in David's house transformed slowly. Boxes were stacked against one wall. A borrowed bed frame was assembled. The mattress came next, then sheets, lilac, because Mila insisted they match Miss Maya's pretty veil. Maya started by telling herself she was leaving soon, just as soon as she stopped crying every morning, just as soon as she could say Jason's name without shaking, just as soon as she figured out where next was. In the meantime, life happened. She helped the girls with homework at the kitchen table, teaching them little memory tricks for spelling. She laughed when Zoe tried to borrow 3 extra cookies after dinner. She listened when Mila whispered her worries about being too quiet at school. She went back to the community library part-time, this time as a consultant helping design programs for kids with disabilities. They set up lower shelves, wider aisles, story hours specifically for children in wheelchairs. At night, she sometimes heard David in the next room moving restlessly, the TV murmuring low. Once, at 2 a.m, she found him sitting on the front steps, elbows on his knees, staring at the dark street. Couldn't sleep? She'd asked, easing her chair beside him. Yeah, he'd said, voice rough. Some days are louder than others. They didn't say Alicia's name that night. They didn't talk about Jason. They just sat there, shoulder to shoulder, breathing the same damp New Orleans air. The veil stayed folded in the closet at first, out of sight. Then, one afternoon, Maya came home to find Zoe and Mila in her room, looking guilty and triumphant. "We washed it," Zoe announced before she could scold them. Maya blinked. "Washed what?" Mila held it up, hands careful and reverent. The lilac-edged veil, now clean and soft again, fluttered in the air conditioning. "It was all muddy," Mila said. "Felt wrong." "So we asked Dad how to wash lace," Zoe added. He said gently. Maya swallowed past the sudden tightness in her throat. "We thought maybe—" Zoe fidgeted. "Maybe it doesn't have to be a wedding thing only. Maybe it can be like a family flag." "A family flag?" Maya echoed. "Yeah," Mila said. "You know how in stories they have banners and castles? This can be ours, yours too, if you want." They had taken a small picture frame from the living room, one that had held an old landscape painting, and replaced it with a new photo. In it, David stood with an arm slung around both girls, Maya at his side, all four of them squinting at the camera and laughing at something the photographer had said. The veil was looped gently around the frame, tied in a loose knot at the corner like a ribbon. Maya stared at it, her vision blurring. "You guys," her voice broke. "You didn't have to—" "We know," Zoe said matter-of-factly. "We wanted to." From then on, the veil wasn't something that haunted her from the back of a drawer. It hung on the wall of the living room, soft and lilac, a quiet banner over the couch where they watched movies and argued about popcorn toppings. Time, stubborn and slow, did what it always does. The sharp edges of grief dulled, just enough to stop drawing blood every time someone bumped into them. Maya learned the small details of David's life, how he took his coffee black with 1 spoon of sugar, how he hummed old R&B when he washed dishes, how he always checked the locks twice before bed. David learned the small details of hers, how music from the 90s made her instantly nostalgic, how thunderstorms made her restless, how she traced the same pattern on the armrest of her wheelchair when she was deep in thought. No one said the word love out loud. It felt fragile, like a glass ornament being passed back and forth without anyone daring to call it by its name. But the house changed. There was more laughter now, more chaos, more shoes by the front door. On the 2nd anniversary of the day they met, David asked the girls to dress nicely. "Are we going to a fancy restaurant?" Zoe asked, suspicious. "Maybe," he said. "Are we in trouble?" Mila asked, worried. "Not even a little," he assured her. They walked together toward the river as the sun began to dip, passing the cafe where Maya liked to get her coffee and the mural the girls claimed belonged to the neighborhood, not the city. When they reached the rusty lamppost and crooked bench, Maya's chest tightened. "This is—" she started. "Yeah," David said softly. "This is where I found you. Or where you found us. Depends how you tell it." The twins spread out a blanket without being told. Someone nearby played saxophone, the notes weaving through the warm air just like they had that day. Maya's heart thudded. "David, what is this?" He turned to her, hands visibly shaking now. It was the first time she'd seen them tremble this much since she'd watched him sign Alicia's name on a form labeled death certificate. "Maya," he said, and her name sounded different in his mouth tonight. He took a small, folded piece of lilac lace from his pocket, the edge of the veil he'd carefully, nervously cut off. "I asked the girls if it was okay," he said quickly, seeing her surprised look. "We thought maybe it could be 2 things at once, a banner and a promise." She stared at the lace, at his hands, at the river. "This veil," he went on, voice low, "was supposed to be worn for a man who wouldn't leave. The first one didn't deserve it. I'm Not going to stand here and promise I'll never make mistakes. I am clumsy and tired and figuring it out as I go. He took a breath. But I can promise you this. I'm not going to run. Not when you're angry. Not when it's hard. Not when the wheels on your chair squeak at 3 in the morning and wake me up. A small laugh hiccuped out of her, tears prickling her eyes. I can't kneel very gracefully with these knees, he added, glancing down. So I'm just going to stay right here. He stepped closer, placing the lilac lace gently over her shoulder like a small, soft weight. You are not a burden, he said, every word clear, steady. You are not a project. You are not a broken thing someone has to fix. You're you. And I love you. So do they. He nodded at the twins. Zoe and Mila were watching, wide-eyed, holding each other's hands. Maya Johnson, David said, finally voicing the question that had been building for months. If you want this, if you want us, would you stay? Not as a guest, not as a temporary, as family. The world went very, very quiet. Maya thought of the church, the whispers, the text that had shattered her. She thought of the spare room turned into a nest of books and blankets, of the laughter echoing in the kitchen, of Zoe insisting on braiding her hair, of Mila leaning against her shoulder during movie nights, half asleep. She thought of Grandma Ruth and her rough hands, tying a veil and talking about the ones who don't give up. Tears spilled over, warm and unashamed. I was so sure, she whispered, that the day he left me was going to be the worst and last chapter of my story. I never thought... She trailed off, shaking her head. David waited, not pushing, not pleading, just there. She reached up, fingers brushing the lilac lace on her shoulder. This was supposed to be for someone who wouldn't leave, she said softly. I know, he answered. She took his hand. Then I guess, she breathed, a smile breaking through the tears, it's finally where it belongs. Zoe let out a whoop. Mila burst into tears of pure, overwhelmed joy. The saxophone player down the path shifted into a brighter melody. The lamppost flickered on, bathing them in a pool of warm light. In the fading gold of a New Orleans evening by the same river that had watched her fall apart, Maya leaned forward and kissed him. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like a blank, scary space. It looked like mismatched chairs around the same dinner table, science projects and overdue library books, late-night conversations on the front steps, two little girls arguing about who got to sit on whose lap. It looked like a house with a lilac veil hanging over a family portrait, not as a reminder of what had been lost, but as a quiet, stubborn banner for what had finally been found. Sometimes, endings masquerade as altars and text messages and ruined dresses. Sometimes they're just doors closing so that, down by a river on an ordinary evening, a different door can open. If a piece of Maya and David's story tugged at something inside you, some old bruise, some quiet hope, know this: you're not as alone as your worst day tried to convince you. And somewhere, even now, there might be a riverbank, or a kitchen table, or a small, unexpected kindness waiting to become the first line of your next chapter.